What is up, Janksters? It's your boy Graham, also known as HamHawks42 on the internet, and we have another edition of the Overthinking MTG Podcast. So at this point, we are more than 200 episodes into the show. I've been doing it on and off for a couple years now, and this show, Overthinking MTG, started by me clicking the random card button on Gatherer. I then changed to Scryfall. Both are fine services. And just talking about a random card every single day, hopefully. But in most times, it ended up being like 3 or 4 times a week. In any event, one of the worst things that could happen was I would land on a basic land because I was committed to spending at least 10 minutes talking about whatever card we landed on. And so there were a couple of times, literally there is an island, video / podcast episode. There is also a forest episode. I'm aware of those for sure. There might be 1 or 2 I'm forgetting. But as you can imagine, I mean, random cards, basic lands are in the pool, so we do hit them from time to time. And also, it's actually not as hard as you might think, because for every new set that comes out, there's like at least 3 or 4 new artworks for each basic land, all of which get cataloged as a separate version of the card. So as far as card search databases are concerned, there's actually a lot of lands to potentially drop on. So oddly enough, today I am voluntarily choosing, aka volunteering, to select a basic land. I actually want to talk about it today. And the basic land that I want to talk about is wastes. And the reason that I want to talk about wastes specifically at this time is because wastes are going to be coming to MTG Arena with Explorer Anthology 2. There are a couple of other lands showing up in Explorer Anthology 2 that are bound to make huge waves. We have Mutavault. We also have Nykthos Shrine to Nyx, which is the big one, of course. But Wastes is going to be introduced, and it's interesting. Wastes were first introduced, I believe, in Oath of the Gatewatch, and they were brought in alongside a ton of Eldrazi cards. There have been a lot of jokes over the years about adding a 6th color to Magic and what it might look like. And the truth of the matter is, with the Eldrazi, they kind of did that. Like, it doesn't look like it because the color pie itself, the wheel hasn't changed, the mana system hasn't changed significantly. However, Wastes being introduced as a basic land did change the paradigm. For the whole game, there had only been 5 basic lands ever, and the moment Waste showed up, it added a 6th. Now, you would imagine that would throw a wrench into some things. Domain, for example, is a great example of this, because Domain cares about the number of basic land types you have among lands you control. Now, Triumphs count for 3, your Shocklands count for 2, that kind of thing. So it cares about the land types. A lot of people were speculating, what about Wastes? Why doesn't, could Waste be a type that Domain picks up? They can't be. Wizards saw that as a potential issue, and as a result, Waste is a basic land card. However, it is not a basic land type. You will notice all copies of Wastes that have been printed do not have a land type. They are just basic land in the type line. That's it. There is no basic land type Wastes. That is huge, as a matter of fact. Because as a result, Wastes are a basic land. However, if a card says, like, search your library for Beside You Who Endures, for example, specifically states the controller of the the affected party, let's say, the owner of the thing it removed, searches their library for a card with a basic land type and puts that card onto the battlefield. It can't search for Wastes. Beside You cannot search a Waste even though it is a basic land, because it does not contain one of the 5 established basic land types. So that's a neat little interchange. You might also wonder, okay, what the heck is a Waste and why do we need it? Wastes are basic land that tap for colorless mana. The reason that is significant is around Oath of the Gatewatch, around that time, they introduced Eldrazi that had specific colorless mana requirements. Let's see. So, for example, we have Thought-Knot Seer. Just as one example. It is a 4/4 for 4, 3, and a colorless. The reason that it is different, it has a bunch of other stuff on it, but I just want to talk about the mana value is the main point here. The reason that colorless is important is because it states you can spend 3 mana of any kind, but 1 mana spent on this must be colorless. Now, that 1 colorless mana could come from a waste. It could also come from a mana rock that is only capable of generating, it can come from a mana rock only capable of generating colorless mana, like a Mind Stone or something of that nature, or any other land capable of producing a colorless mana. To that end, the Pain lands that have been recently reprinted in Brothers War and Dominaria United are unique in that way. They can actually help with that because they do not. They can tap for 1 colorless mana, or you can tap them for colored mana, and it also pings you for 1. That colorless mana could absolutely be used to cast a Thought-Knot Seer, or it was a Kozilek Great Distortion, I believe is the one that also has that same requirement on it. So what Wizards did was they force you to use colorless mana to cast certain Eldrazi. And by forcing their hand, forcing colorless mana for specifically colorless permanents, you ended up in a situation where we've effectively added a 6th mana type into the game. And by adding that additional mana type, which it was kind of elegantly done from a rules perspective, because that mana already existed. Colorless mana was already a thing. It's always been a thing since day 1. Usually it's been, I don't know if anything could produce colorless mana in the very beginning of the game. That would be an interesting thing to look up. But the idea of colorless mana is not crazy. It's been around for a long time. It's been a part of the game for frickin' ever, as far back as I can remember, that's for sure. And so the idea of, but it was always treated as just the bad mana. Colorless mana, you could only use it to spend on generic casting costs. So, it was fine, but if you have too much of it in your, if you have too much of it in your mana base, you're going to have a tough time casting your colored spells, which is, of course, we're playing Magic. That's what you want to do. So Wizards flipped the script a little bit by making the colorless spells the point in this set, or at least a point, a viable option in this set, and forcing colorless into the mix suddenly opened that up in interesting ways. So wastes will be coming to MTG Arena in Explorer Anthology 2, alongside a couple of these Eldrazi that force you to have colorless mana. So all of a sudden, we could be seeing Thought-Knot Seer in Explorer. Strap in, that's going to be a thing. I suspect, like every one of these anthologies, you're going to see a ton of those cards in the first week, maybe 2 weeks, and they're going to drop off until people there's going to be 1, maybe 2 that actually stick around in the meta and are meaningful, and the people who are who didn't buy the bundle when it first dropped are just going to craft those later and call it a day. I'll tell you right now, Nykthos is going to be one of them, but we all knew that already. Waste, however, if I'm not mistaken, I believe these will actually be freely available in your account on day 1. They're just going to give them to you because they're basic lands. Now, I've no doubt there will be cosmetic variants, but if you just want to have a waste for your deck, boom, there you go. I find this really interesting for a couple of reasons. At the end of the day, the colorless mana requirements on Arena specifically are very, very low. There are a lot of cards that encourage you to have colorless mana. Things like Forsaken Monument, for example. If a land you control taps, I believe it's actually any permanent you control taps for a colorless mana, you add a colorless mana for that. So it just doubles your mana production if your mana base is capable of producing colorless mana. The moment you have wastes into the mix, you're golden. Now, interestingly enough, I have colorless Historic Brawl decks right now that have 100% colorless mana bases, using one-of copies of utility lands that have been printed throughout the course of Arena's history. Do I need an Animal Sanctuary or a Throne of Makindi or whatever? Do I need the added utility that those particular cards give me? Well, no, not generally anyway, but you never know. But they're wastes plus. They have a little extra something that maybe is beneficial, but otherwise they do just give me a thing. They give me the colorless mana I need. So adding wastes into Arena, I don't think is going to make a significant difference at all, because most of those cards I just mentioned And frankly, those were just 2 off the top. There are, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there are honestly 100 unique colorless utility lands in Arena right now, and that's not even counting the pain lands that we discussed, which could also theoretically be useful in decks that are colorless specifically. I'm not sold on waste being valuable here. Unless you're running it alongside like green style ramp that lets you search for a basic land. That's the one situation. If you want to be searching for basic lands, or if you want to have basic lands on the battlefield for a particular effect, or potentially to hose your opponent, then all right, that might be valuable. But at the end of the day, like, if you want to run colorless, you have better options than this. And like the one big benefit that I see of this card existing in general is if you want to run a colorless commander deck, you can just buy a bunch of these and your mana base is set, more or less. That's neat. That's nice. I'm glad they made it simple for us. But at the same time, like, I don't know. It doesn't seem that valuable to me. Like, this doesn't seem that important. There must be a synergy I'm missing. And if I am, please leave it in the comments. Or, if you ever reach out to me on Discord, there's a link to my link tree is available in all the descriptions across all the podcast networks that the show's available in. Feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to, I would love to be proven wrong. I'd love to eat some crow on this one if there is an interaction that I'm not thinking of. A card that has some kind of benefit for having a number of basic lands on the field. And all of a sudden being able to take advantage of that in colorless is, synergistic and cool. I'm sure those effects exist. That's the thing that's beautiful about Magic. Like, if you think about a certain interaction or something that you're looking for, it's probably out there. And I love it. So yeah, Waste is an interesting card. Yeah. I know when I get talking, I can talk about even a basic land, and even a basic land that doesn't produce colors. But anyway, it's interesting stuff. I like that it's coming. I like the fact that we're getting an option. But yeah, I don't know that's going to be important. I guess if you have a small collection on Arena, right? That's it. If you have a small collection on Arena and you really, really want to build a colorless Historic Brawl deck, either around like the new Kozilek that's coming out, or if you wanted to take like Karn Living Legacy, who is actually my colorless commander of choice, by the way. And that deck's actually not bad either. Or like Ugin Ineffable is a really cool colorless planeswalker that you can do some neat stuff with in Historic Brawl. If you want to build that, Waste all of a sudden, you don't have to burn a bunch of wild cards on utility lands now. That's pretty cool. Like that's neat. So, all right. I guess from a budget perspective, I'm glad they're adding it to Arena. That's going to be nice. That's going to help. So, cool. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate it very, very much. This is the Overthinking MTG Podcast, available on YouTube as well as anywhere podcasts are sold. Please follow, like, subscribe, whatever it's called on your podcaster of choice. And I hope you have a phenomenal day, and I'll catch you on the next one.